Hi, my name's Alex. I am second year in International Relations, and you are listening to 94.9 CHRW.
You're listening to the Forum on CHRW. This is a place for students to ask questions and hopefully foster conversations. It is a safe place for students to come in and ask the questions that might be on their mind without fear of how they're going to be judged. It is for the students and by the students, which means you're not going to hear lecturers and professors come in, but it's simply going to be students asking questions and maybe sparking a conversation. And we're back on the forum. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you, Yoav, because this is a hard one, and I can understand why people run screaming from this one. So we're talking today. I guess we're just talking about the Western White Student Union right now, and White Student Unions as a general, but this is the face of racism right now, because what you have is a group that is fundamentally flawed at its core, but using high ideals to justify their existence, and throwing it back in the face of people who essentially showing how there can be racism on the other side as well. So it's just a horrible situation that unfortunately exists. Before we get back into the conversation that we were just in, how did we get to this point? Like, one of the, I'm going to do another sort of solo piece in a bit talking about the introduction to the forum and my heroes, and one of the people on there is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this was 60 years ago, and there was hope at that point for some sort of equality and race relations and stuff like that. And if you look at where we are now, I don't think we've come forward. I think we've started moving backwards.
I think progress has been made, but at the same time, people are still angry, and I feel in many cases justifiably so.
100%. But the problem is, we're starting to get the anger on all sides now, not just the oppressed people. Which yes, there is. But now there's backlash and anger on both sides, and conversations breaking down. We're not having conversation anymore. At universities, the place where high morals and high ideals have a chance to come out and have the conversation and influence the world, people are just downright afraid to have these conversations because they're going to be listed as racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever you want. And particularly when it comes to race relations, we're not moving forward anymore. Unfortunately, that's my belief, and it scares me. You look at what's going on in the States right now, and that's just flat out terrifying. So we're talking about at the moment the Western White Student Union, and we kind of got into a really interesting area right as the alarm went off, and it always happens.
Yep.
Oh, where were we? What were we talking about with it? It's early in the morning today, and my brain's not working.
We were talking about whether it was like what benefit it would provide.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for any group to get together and to network and share like-minded ideals, there is. Oh, we were actually talking about what they post and stuff and why they. Yeah. And why, oh my God, what the heck is wrong with you people? Oh, I'm going to have to edit that one out. What is wrong with you people? What is possessing you to do stuff like this? At the same time, posters for a white student union, I sort of understand why they can cause, people to be uncomfortable, but to say that you don't feel safe based on a poster, why do you think that one came about? Because, and I will fully admit, this is probably one of those experiences that I just don't have. I'm a 6'4" white guy that wears a big black trench coat. There are very few situations I ever feel uncomfortable in.
Yeah. Well, let me answer your question with another question. How surprised are you that threats were made to people in the Black Students Association from the white students, from the page of the White Students Union? Were you less surprised than other cultural clubs?
Sadly, I wasn't surprised at all.
There you are. There's your answer.
And this comes back to my big comment that this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah.
Because the second a bunch of people get together, particularly with white student unions, the biggest problem is the second you get a bunch of people together like that, ideas that may not naturally come to some people that they would, I think you start getting almost the mob mentality, things that, you normally wouldn't entertain. Mm-hmm. Somebody can find a way to worm those into those groups, mm-hmm. and you start thinking, well, yeah, the white robes sound like a great idea today. which fortunately we haven't got to in Western yet, but some of the stuff that page puts out there, it's one step away. From brown shirts and burning books.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately Western, and I've said this a few times on my Facebook page and stuff like that, and Western has a history with people using their prejudices to put forward really bad ideas. And that was what's his name? I'll get back to it in a second.
We'll get back to it, yeah.
And they're using his picture on the front of the page. So it's so the question starts becoming, where do we go from here? What do we do? I don't think anybody can argue, even me with my high moralistic ideals, that this thing should exist, because it shouldn't. There is no reason for any of the white student unions to exist. Where do we go? What do we do?
So furthermore, all you have to do is Google racist Western professor,
yep.
and you'll come up with J. Philip Rushton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who was doing psychology experiments where he was attempting to find relations between, trying to find connections between race or genetics and IQ.
Particularly, no, it was particularly race. It wasn't just genetics. It really was. And he
very specifically about like race and intelligence, race and crime, any other sort of racial variation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, his work was published. It was accepted. It is still quoted today, which is horrible, because it's been proven many, many times that his research was flawed. His whole premise, it wasn't good research. It wasn't good thought. It was just horribleness. You can't see the look on my face right now because you're on radio, but oh my God. So, Western particularly has almost a duty to stand up against this stuff. But our white student union page is still up. It's still active. It's getting more likes by the day. I'm not going to say, I'm not even advocating going to the site and looking at it. It's, as far as I know, ignore it and it will go away. But, so, but where do we go? What do we do? Come on, Yoav, fix this for us.
Where do we go? I mean, apparently the university has done what it can. I feel as if the university and the general populace can do more about, I guess, the page in itself. I mean, it is spewing racial hatred. It is offending people. It is threatening people. And so, I guess, basically it does need to be taken down 100%.
I think this comes to the sort of the problem of I said we'd come back to it earlier, and this segues into it nicely, and I blanked on it.
Well, we're talking about how it should be taken down.
Yeah, but it's now heading into sort of the race relations and threats and that sort of stuff.
Right. So what can be done in terms of racial? What's the best way to approach it? Approach race relations, if not with. Okay, so let's talk about that. How do we approach race relations now? When we have a society that is heading towards even more diversiveness, where we don't want to deal with you, we don't want to we don't want you in our space. How do we patch that? How do we fix that? Right. Well, the thing is that I think you've talked about and I think this might also tie in what we talked about earlier in terms of excluding students from going into a community based or cultural based event. what do we do? I mean, we the whole point of those clubs is to educate. So I think the point of cultural clubs is to educate, especially ones that have advocacy centered in its mandate as well. They're also there to advocate and to talk about the issues that they face that we may not see, that other people may not see.
Yeah.
And you should be there to listen and see and just be there to listen and see what you can do to change change any approaches that you may have that may be contributing to that, and also to educate other people about the other issues that they may be able to help with.
I wander the internet, which maybe never is the smart thing to do, because it really does.
Eventually someone gets called Hitler, so yeah.
Well, that is what's his name's law of the internet, and it has unfortunately been proven true.
Godwin's law.
Godwin's law. And we even did it in this conversation. I even brought it up, and as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I'm like, there it is. The problems, the issue that I'm sort of hopping across when I come across sites is there is this sort of attempt to make certain groups, and particularly white groups, not only just feel guilty, but feel that they have no voice and no way to speak. And I sort of wonder about that.
I get what you're saying. However, I feel as if that's more of like a current issue than anything as well. And like the idea of being and while I do think that it is an issue, being excluded from there.
That's what we were talking about.
Right, yes. And I don't feel as if it should be to the point where you need an advocacy, you need a group of a formal advocacy group for the people that are being.
Of course not. No. Yeah. However, it does lead to these are direct correlations.
Yeah.
We see what happened at Missouri University with a number of white students supporting them getting kicked out.
Yeah.
Purely based on their skin, which was what they were protesting to begin with. And I don't think the worst part is I don't think the group that did it saw the irony in it, which sort of bothers me, because if you're going to do something, at least see the irony in it. Which led to the formation of this. We're at the same time, and moving a little bit away from racism for just a second. With all the sort of severe feminism that we've seen lately, we had the conversation about radical feminism with Bianca and stuff, but that severe extreme feminism is driving men away, and it's causing the creation of groups like Return of Kings, which is again why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, men's rights, red pill, stuff like that.
Well, men's rights are a completely different issue.
Okay, well, we'll get into that.
I'm not going to get into that one right now because that is a whole nother area. But particularly the if you again on surface thought, the ideals behind Return of Kings shouldn't be that bad. It's the idea that men need a space away from women. Yeah. Which
wrong place, wrong time, I feel.
No, not even that. It's the second you allow it to happen, this is what happens, and this is why we can't have nice things. Because these guys are a bunch of sexist, homophobic idiots. And yes, I will stick to that. Anybody who, if you belong to Return of Kings, if you are an advocate for Return of Kings, please come talk to me, because I'd love to figure out what is going on in your head. So the question is, when we start getting so derisive and the conversation starts turning to ways that it's driving people off, and yes, like the Western White Student Union with its subtle threats, though what they did with the black students imposing that wasn't subtle, that was a threat. With that, but at the same time, the second anything pops up like that, instead of having intelligent conversation, people go, oh my God, I feel really threatened, and it's destroying my safe space, and I don't have a home, and that sort of stuff. Again, this sort of sensationalized ideology that just breaks apart the conversation instead of fostering it. How did we get here, and how do we bring it back? How do we return to normalcy? Normalcy.
Like I said earlier, I mean, people are angry, and in many cases, justifiably so. At the same time, this is how I personally feel, and I can't speak for especially any of the groups that we've been talking about today, that while many people are justifiably angry for many justifiable things, from a logical strategic standpoint, it's not being angry is not the best way to make change.
No.
Well, I mean, I guess some level of heated courage, definitely. Being angry and shouting at people that they're, that's never worked with anybody that I know.
No.
There are many cases, very extremist cases, in which people say, or people are just sort of shouting at you what you're doing wrong, which nobody on earth, I would say, appreciates. I feel as if that's a bit of a universal truth. But at this, people should be more open to listening to the criticisms that are brought towards them. But it's very unlikely that people in general are going to take them if they're going to be shouted at. But at the same time, I feel as if that shouldn't also be a representation of how people in general conduct themselves. These are very newsworthy, and these are very extreme and newsworthy moments that I feel are taken to be the norm in how people talk about race and race relations and how people express themselves. So I feel as if basically how did we get here is more of a question of is actually maybe more of a question of how do we perceive the whole, by which parts do we extrapolate to the whole.
And that'll come down to sort of media coverage and that sort of thing, which unfortunately is our culture at the moment. We take everything in 30-second sound bites, and the most extreme sound bite wins. However, that extremism is taken onto the internet, which has become the socio-cultural norm, which then continues on to normal discourse. So unfortunately these may be what we would have, even 10 years ago considered the outside extreme fringes. They are becoming the single representation of an ideal that is being taken as the norm.
I see what you mean.
So the problem and the easiest way to show this is a lot of people look at the white student union at Western and use that as the basis for their formation of opinions of all white people at Western. People.
I'm not sure if we get to that. I'm not sure if we get to that.
How often do you hear the stereotype of the stereotypical white Western girl?
Is the stereotypical white Western girl overtly racist?
In some if you were to Google white Western girl,
okay,
yes, racist is one of the things that is listed.
Okay,
I don't believe it, but it is one of the things that's being listed.
Okay,
the second the poster goes up for a white student union, which again, there's problems here, but the second it goes up, anybody of color starts to feel threatened because and starts to think, well, who belongs to this group? What, they feel threatened by all white people, where this is starting to become the socio-cultural norm. So
I don't know.
At the same time, sorry, before I go, there was some video on YouTube that somebody shared with me, where they were talking about, every 45 seconds a black person walks into an elevator, and he says, you backing into the corner and clutching your purse. The whole tone of it was threatening. It was supposed to be, I think the intent of the message was to say, when a black guy walks into an elevator, you shouldn't feel threatened. But the whole tone of it was, I may not beat the living crap out of you and rape you and whatever, but I'm thinking it. And I'm not entirely sure who the audience it was supposed to speak of, but I can tell you a lot of people took it as oh my God, this is what's going through their mind. And this is what people start thinking of that particular ethnocultural group. Whereas it's an extreme and horribly wrong-sided view in that, so we have stereotypes, we have ideals that are being perpetuated that are now becoming the socio norm. So people are starting to take that as the norm for these people.
To be honest, I don't know how far we can go into this conversation mainly because we, neither of us, I can't even speak for how people feel threatened in society and how people feel and how people are offended by what other people say in society. I can't personally speak for another group and tell you or tell them what they should get offended by, what should and shouldn't make them feel uncomfortable. Because the thing is I'm sure there are things that make you feel uncomfortable, David, that don't make other people feel uncomfortable. But I'm sure you'd ask people to stop making you feel uncomfortable about it. It's not you'd ask people to stop doing it.
Yeah.
At least politely at first, until let's say, I don't know, 200 years later. if someone kept doing it for 200 years to you,
fair,
I don't know, for several hundred years to you, how do you respond?
Fair. Yeah. Okay. I'm actually sitting over here grinning because I think part of what you've hit is the nail on the head, in that no two individuals can ever sit down and tell anybody else how they should feel. But at the same time, two individuals sitting down and having a conversation fosters continuation of the conversation. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
And we learn too. We learn.
Exactly.
We learn more about our own arguments and our own ideas, and how well they hold up against other ideas.
Exactly. So I do think that there are certainly issues that need to be talked about as a whole, and the more people we involve in the group. But 100%, you're 100% right. We cannot intelligently talk about anybody else's experiences. At the same time, we can put our 2 cents in, we can ask questions, which is what we're doing, and we can go from there. And I'm grinning from ear to ear because this is exactly where this needs to go.
Yep.
In no way, shape, or form can, and this is part of the problem with policymakers and stuff like that, is it eventually comes down to a couple of people having a conversation and going, well, and I think that, part of the problem is people aren't having this conversation. But at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation I had with you guys when we were talking about Palestine versus Israel, or particularly its effects here on campus, the end of the day, my conversation always comes down to, how do we foster more conversation? How do we... there's no definitive way to fix this, but how do we move forward? How do we bring this to the next level where people don't feel threatened when somebody posts something stupid? How do we make it so that the stereotypes start to disappear? How do we foster conversation? Where do we go? What's your idea, Yoav?
I think the first thing is listening. I think just, if people took a little bit more time to listen and really research the counter side to the counter of their own arguments. I feel as if once everybody has a better understanding, everybody uses the same definitions for things, which is something that we talked about before.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that, and I don't think we're gonna have time.
I don't think we're at time. Not today, man. But if everybody speaks in the same speaks under the same terms. Obviously I don't want anybody to get angry. There are people who are going to be justifiably angry, but at the same time, personally, I don't think it would work for me, to change, to anybody who wants to, change my views on something. Personally, to me, getting angry in an extremist fashion doesn't work. It doesn't work on me. Maybe a little bit, but other than that, it just makes me, and I feel as if this is like a universal truth in the human psyche, that people will want to just sort of push back. And I think that kind of and more likely than not, unjustifiably push back when you're not listening to what someone's trying to say, but you're more listening in like the tone that they're saying it, and it leads to things like that. Yeah.
You're and this is why I'm so glad you joined me, because yeah, you're right. At least from my point of view, anyway, coming at something from a place of anger never solves a problem. It just makes things worse, because one of two things will happen out. Either they'll just tune out and walk away, and then you've lost them. You've lost whoever was the person did something that is very rare in society right now, in that they came up and they started a conversation. Even if you don't agree with what they're saying, they crossed the floor and said, "Hey, something's up. Let's talk."
Yeah.
And then by getting angry, they've walked away and you've lost them. That is, unfortunately, in that situation, the best case scenario, because the worst case scenario is, as you were talking about, they push back, they get angry themselves, and it leads to where we are right now. You look at what happened in and I pick on this because it is probably one of the most extreme examples, what happened at Missouri University. And literally the fallout from that was white people pushing back in a way that perhaps never would have been considered before that. So coming at it from a place of anger is never,
I think, actually, you know what? I think that initially starting off, you can definitely start off angry. I think you can start. I think you can start off angry. I think getting people's attention, whether it's in the form of angry written, angry prose, whether it's protests, whether it's rioting. If you're being completely ignored, shout,
do whatever,
shout. You have to. There's sometimes you need to shout in order to be at the same decibel level as the person speaking softly, and then once they acknowledge you,
I like that one.
Conclusively, I feel as if that in order for things to be worked out, especially in such a nuanced way, I feel as if different strategies are required, or at least might be a better idea.
Interesting point, and certainly I probably haven't thought of it that way myself, so this is again why we do this. I think that's definitely a great idea, definitely a great concept, that to get heard, you need to speak up sometimes, and anger can get you to that point where you get people to the table where people start to take notice. I will say the rioting thing, not so much. For me personally, just with personal life experience, the second it turns to violence, the conversation goes in a completely different area, and that takes it away. So I think you'd probably agree with me to say that violence should never be an option.
Yeah, I should say, maybe I shouldn't have said rioting, but fair enough.
No, I actually understand 100% where you were coming from with it. I just really wanted to clarify that. But at the same time, when you finally get your voice heard and it's time to come down to the table, coming at it from a place of extreme violence, of extreme anger, and not being able to separate yourself from that anger and having a normal conversation, that nothing ever comes from that. And I think just sitting down and having a conversation is a great place to start. So that was my timer. If you didn't hear it, do you have anything you want to say before we head off?
No. Thank you for having me, David. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on this and sitting down and for what I hope is the start of a good conversation for people. This has been The Forum. I'm David Seston with Yoav. Thank you so much.